In my opinion, almost nobody has been taught how to think. In most cases, people have been taught what to think. They've been taught history, they've been taught math, they've been taught biology, but not the process by which you can come to your own conclusions via your own intellect. They haven't been taught the mechanics of logic, they haven't been taught the mechanics of reasoning or rationality. And I think that that's a problem. And I'm not going to sit here and, preach to you as if I'm the smartest, most 200 IQ guy out there. But what I can tell you is I've learned 5 little, I guess calling them hacks would be incorrect here. I've learned 5 tricks. I've learned 5 moves, I guess you could say, that are quite beneficial to learning how to learn and learning how to think. So, I guess the first thing that I'll talk to you guys about is the fact that school, again, doesn't teach you critical thinking. It doesn't teach you logic, really. It doesn't teach you rationality. It doesn't teach you reason. What it does is give you content, and it never really gives you the system by which you can evaluate this content or come to your own conclusions. And I'm not going to tell you how we should fix the school system because I've had a very interesting schooling background myself, so I'm not really in a position to talk about this. But from most of my friends who have graduated high school and have graduated college, they tend to say things like, well, I learned a lot of theory. I know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, for example, but I don't know how to reason from first principles. I don't know how to tell if the argument that I'm making is a good one or a bad one. And if I was completely unfiltered speaking to these people, I would say, well, that is a bad thing. That is not your fault, of course, but it is your responsibility, and it is your problem. It's your responsibility to fix this problem. And how this manifests in a lot of people, the idea of, I've taken in so much content, but I'm not really sure how to evaluate what is correct. I'm not really sure how to evaluate what I personally agree with, things like this. It tends to manifest in a confidence conflated with correctness kind of it's not really a personality trait. It's more of a thing that you do, conflating confidence with being correct. Most people are so certain about things that they haven't researched or examined maybe at all or maybe just at length. And I'll tell you something, just personally, there's nothing more aggravating than a person like that, right? When you're, having a conversation, maybe even a debate or an argument with somebody, and they go, no, this is 100% true and I know it. And you know, based off of what is objectively true, that that is not the case. That is not true. They probably haven't looked into this thing at all, or if they have, they've done a quick Google search and they've glanced at the 2 top results and they've gone, no, I know it now. I know it now. Here's the miscalculation that is made when you say, I feel certain, therefore I am correct. Certainty is an emotion. It's a feeling. I can feel certain about something, right? Correctness is not a feeling. It is not an emotional state. I am correct or I am not. It is a binary. And as I've said multiple times on this show, I believe that nothing is ever just one way. But you are either correct or you are not. And I know that that's a bit of a contradiction, but we don't need to get into that right now. The central idea is that certainty tells you how strongly you believe something. Correctness is whether or not you are saying objective truth, right? If I tell you that the definition of the word agree means to say no to everything that you are saying, you can objectively go, that's not true. That's actually disagreement. That's actually the opposite, because I can look in the Merriam-Webster dictionary and see objectively in concrete letters, to agree means to say, yes, you're correct. We think the same thing about this. Not the opposite, which is I think that you're wrong, actually. We think the opposite about this. Anyway, smart people, I guess putting in air quotes, smart people are not necessarily more susceptible to this, but when they do have this conflation of correctness and certainty, it's the worst. And I've fallen into this trap more times than I can count. I can count pretty high, by the way. The smarter you are, the better you are at arguments, the better you are at debates, the better you are at conversing, the better you are at discourse, the more slippery of a slope this is. And here's what I mean. If you are incredibly certain about a certain, that's funny. If you are incredibly certain about a specific, I should say, subject, topic, whatever, and you are, again, in air quotes, smarter than average, I guess, you can build an incredibly compelling, convincing case for whatever you believe at that moment. Because you're just good at words. You're good at, you're good at making a point, I guess. And most of the time, this has nothing to do with whether or not what you are saying is objectively true or not. I believe that intelligence with the lack of reasoning, rationality, and logic, it's an interesting affliction. It's a very interesting affliction. And it's hard to navigate. I'm not going to toot my own horn here, but I'd like to think that I'm somewhat smart, at least. And I tend to be very certain about things. That's just that's just a personality trait that I hold, I guess. I'm a very, I'm concrete, I'm right about this, and I know it type of person. And when I do feel very certain about something that I don't know, I tend to make compelling arguments in my favor because I'm like, hey, I actually know exactly what I'm talking about here. And then if somebody gives me a good point and they say objectively that's not true, I go, well, actually, if you look at it like this, we've all fallen into this. Well, I shouldn't say we've all, but a lot of us have fallen into this hole of knowing that we're incorrect in an argument and still arguing our side just because we love to be right. And I'm definitely one of these people. My beautiful, amazing, lovely wife has helped me sort of move out of this rut multiple times. But still, it's a good feeling to be right. Just is. All of that being said, here are the 5 highest leverage, I guess you could say, the 5 highest leverage moves that you could make in order to be better at things, in order to be smarter, in order to be more intellectual. The first thing that you must do when having any kind of conversation, whether it's a positive conversation, a negative conversation, you're having a friendly debate, you're having a heated argument, is to define your terms. Because here's something very interesting. You can be having a 3-hour-long conversation with somebody about anything. You're using the same words, but they mean 2 completely different things to the 2 completely different parties inside of this conversation. There's no real way to tell if you and the other party that you're talking to are talking about the same thing unless you define your terms objectively before you guys get into the nitty-gritty of it. And because most people tend not to do this, most arguments are not real arguments. They're 2 people using the same words and talking about completely different things. Some examples I have here are, I want more quality time with you. I feel disrespected. We need to be more financially responsible. Every single one of these phrases or sentences means something different to every person who says this particular phrase or sentence, because there are two definitions to every word or phrase. And you may be going, nope, just the dictionary. Walk with me here. There's the objective meaning, the objective definition, which is written inside of the dictionary. What do these words mean? And then there's the subjective meaning, or the subjective definition. What do you mean in this particular circumstance? And defining what you mean in this particular circumstance means that when we are talking about this term, say, I feel disrespected, define disrespect. What does that mean? We need to be more financially responsible. Define financially responsible. What does that mean to you right now in this circumstance? Right? Because if you think that financial responsibility is putting away 80% of your money into index funds, and I think that being financially responsible means not blowing 80% of our money at, the casino, we have two completely different definitions of what it is to be financially responsible. If you believe that spending quality time with me means we sit on a blanket in a meadow, in a grove of sorts, of flowering petunias, and we talk about life with a glass of wine in hand, and I believe that spending quality time together means we watch Naruto on the couch and smoke weed, we have two completely different definitions of the same term. Before any important conversation or unimportant conversation with your partner, business partner, even yourself, define the words that you will be using throughout the conversation. Define your terms. Slow down and go, wait a minute. What are we actually talking about here? Right? Once you do that, this is a blanket statement, but once you do that, half of the conflict disappears, I would say on average. Because if you get clear on what both parties mean in this particular circumstance, you can go, oh, wait. I actually thought that you meant something completely different. Interesting. Okay, now that I know what you think, we can actually come to a reasonable, rational, logical conclusion that makes both of us happy. Because we know what we're talking about now. And this isn't a purely intellectual endeavor either. This is absolutely practical. In fact, one of the best case studies of this is Aristotle, who said, the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms, meaning you define your terms. That's the beginning of wisdom. And we can define wisdom in this context as knowing what's going on. That's it. The beginning, the first step that you must take in order to know what is going on objectively is to define your terms. What is it that we are talking about right now here? Right? Now, he said that 2,400 years ago, approximately, and we still have a problem with this today. So that is number one. That's the number one highest leverage action you can take to make sure that you don't have meaningless arguments, right? Define your terms. And this isn't just applicable in arguments, by the way. If you're having a constructive conversation, for example, with your love, you could say, hey, I want to travel more. Well, define travel more. Does that mean taking one extra vacation every year? Or does that mean we are home for a month out of every year? What does that mean? And then once you guys get on the same page, there's no need for an argument because he or she knows, actually what Justin is saying is we should be taking 2 vacations a year for our quality of life. Cool. Now the second, and these are in no particular order, by the way. The second action that you can take to make sure that you don't put yourself through meaningless suffering is to define the beliefs underneath your beliefs, also known as your premises, the beliefs that everything else is built upon. A premise is a foundational belief, meaning all of your other beliefs are built upon this one. Every single position that you hold, every single opinion you have, every single decision you've made, every conclusion you've come to rests upon these foundational beliefs or premises. Most of the premises that most people have were given to them before they were even old enough to write full sentences. They were handed to us by our teacher, our preacher, our guru, our parents, our culture, our religion, our school, etc., etc. And they were installed in us, again, before we could even write full sentences, before we could even read, before we could even make our own opinions. These beliefs, foundational beliefs, upon which everything else is built, were given to us. Now, the question that really moves the needle here, I guess you could say, is, did I choose this belief for myself, or did someone else choose it for me? Furthermore, if I did not choose this belief, did the person who chose this for me or injected it into me, did they have my best interest at heart? Most of the time, they don't. Right? Crazy thing to say. Most people never take the time to actually define what they believe about anything. Their entire life is running on inherited beliefs, right? The example that I like to use is, imagine you're a person that believes in their heart of hearts that money is the root of all evil. And you also have a goal to make $1 million this year. If you believe that this thing that you are striving towards is the root of all evil, the chances of you achieving this goal, making $1 million a year, those chances are exceedingly low. Because you don't want to be evil, probably. I don't know, maybe you do. Maybe you just want to make a crazy weapon or a crazy virus that kills the whole human race. But the chances of you striving towards something that you believe is inherently evil is quite low. On the other hand, if you believe that currency is the lifeblood of civilization and you want to make $1 million this year, or you believe that money exists as a tool to make your life better, or, any empowering financial belief, you will probably strive to make that goal, that vision, a reality. And it'll probably be a whole lot easier than if you believed that money is the root of all evil. So that's number 2. Number 1, define your terms. Number 2, define your premises, your beliefs. So let's talk about number 3. Reasoning from first principles. And a lot of people mess this one up. A lot of people tend to not really know what you mean when you say reason from first principles. And the definition that I use is first principles thinking, or first principles reasoning, is the practice of reasoning forward from what you can objectively verify as true. You break your problem or your belief down to its most fundamental, undeniable truths, and you build your conclusion from there, from the foundation, from the first principle. An example of this would be somebody walking up to you or I and saying, hey, I'm going to jump off this building, and because I jump off this building, I will fly away like a bird into the sunset. You and I, if we're using first principles thinking, would probably think to ourselves, well, I know that humans don't fly. I know that. Unless they're in a plane or some sort of a helicopter, humans don't fly on their own without the help of outside technology. The reason why I know this is because of gravity, right? I am tethered to the ground because of a force that we call gravity, right? I know this to be true. And the fact that humans don't have wings that can generate enough force to make you fly would mean that what you just said is not true. Therefore, jumping off a building will not make you fly. Right? Break the problem down to its most core, fundamental claim, I guess. And then you go, okay, do I believe this to be true? Actually, do I know this to be true? And if you know it to be not true, then you can go, okay, well, that's not true. The fundamental claim is not true. Pretty useful, I would say. First principles thinking, first principles reasoning means you go back to what you actually know to be true, and you build your claim from there. Every person who has changed their life or their field or the world in any significant way did it by questioning the frame, the fundamental claim, instead of just arguing about what was inside of the fundamental claim, or I guess the claim overall. They went to the very depths of this thing, and they said, no, that's not true, actually, and here's how we know this. Pretty useful indeed. So that's number 3, first principles thinking. Number 4 is actively looking for counter-arguments or reasons why you are wrong. Counterintuitive, I know. The reason why this is so hard for people like me, and maybe people like you, is because of something called confirmation bias. We are wired to find evidence that confirms our beliefs or confirms our claims. Again, we want to be right. We want more than anything to be right. So our brains are wired to look for things that confirm what we think, what we say, what we do, right? And the problem with that is that if you're wrong, you will still find things that confirm what you believe or what you think or what you said, right? So this move is basically looking for the best argument against your position before you fully commit to it. Not to talk yourself out of whatever position you are intending to make, but to field test it, I guess you could say. Field testing your opinions or beliefs is incredibly useful because sometimes you will prove yourself false and come out the other side of this experiment, of this exercise, with a more dialed-in objective premise than the one that you started with, which is pretty ideal. If you field test your beliefs, if you field test your claim, whatever it is, you can sort of future-proof it by going, okay, well, I know what most people will say to this, and I have a preloaded argument against that. Or if you find a real hole in your argument, you can go, oh, shit, I actually need to think about this. Do I need to rethink my position as a whole? Do I need to rethink this one certain component of it? What's the move here? So that's number 4. Actively look for why you are wrong. And this isn't like over-intellectualizing everything that you do to a point where you can't do anything, a la The Underground Man by Fyodor Dostoevsky. But it is quite important to not just go out there with a half-baked truth and assume that you are correct, because that's what it is. If you don't know, you are assuming, right? And number 5 is actually knowing the difference between what you know to be true and what you believe to be true. These things often feel incredibly similar, maybe even identical. They are not. You know something to be true, again, from first principles, when you have evidence and a logical chain from that evidence to a logical conclusion. So you can go, okay, evidence points to this logically, therefore this conclusion is backed by evidence and logic. right? Your beliefs are something that feel true to you. And you can have beliefs that are objectively rooted in reality, of course, but what I'm saying is the difference between feeling that something is true and knowing that something is true is when you know there is evidence that backs it. When you feel, that's just a feeling, that's just an emotion. And both of these matter deeply, right? But they're not the same. Treating a belief as a fact is one of the most consequential mistakes that you can make. This is the root of every holy war. People go, my beliefs are truth and yours are false. Therefore, X, Y, and Z. Therefore, we will kill you. Therefore, we will take over your kingdom, or whatever, right? It's the premise upon which holy war is built. And I don't think holy war is a great thing. I do believe that coffee is a great thing, though. So when you catch yourself being incredibly certain, I try to do this as much as I can. In fact, I should probably make it a habit, a daily habit. You should ask yourself, do I actually know this to be true? Or do I just believe it? If you ask that question consistently, you will change your decision-making forever in a fundamental sense. Pretty cool. If you make decisions based on what you believe, the margin for error is larger than if you make decisions based on what you know. And this is not to say that analysis paralysis is the way to go. I'm just saying making decisions based on objective truth, objective fact, universal law is probably more effective than making decisions based on what you believe to be true. Again, we can go back to the I believe that when I jump off of this building, I will fly away because I have a secret power inside of me. You believe that to be true. Making that decision could result in the loss of your life, or at least the breaking of your legs, depending on how tall the building is. A quote that I love, I heard this originally from Chris Williamson, but I'm not sure if he's the one who originated it. I would rather hold strong beliefs loosely than loose beliefs strongly. Powerful. Now, here's what we mean by this. Holding loose beliefs strongly means that I have this loose, sort of undefined belief. It's half-baked, but I will hold on to it as if my life depends on it. Right? As opposed to holding strong beliefs loosely, you have this strong, fully baked belief that you've thought deeply about, but you are still open to debate, you are still open to opinion, you are still open to even counter-argument. It's a much stronger choice, in my opinion. So those are the 5 highest leverage moves, right? The first one we have, define your terms. Second one, define your premises, your foundational beliefs. The third one, reason from first principles, reason from what you really know to be true. Number 4, actively look for why you could be incorrect. Number 5, know the difference between what you know to be true and what you believe to be true, which I guess is similar to reasoning from first principles, but there are some nuances there. Now, to go a little bit deeper into the, I guess you could call it the premise problem, your entire life is built upon your foundational beliefs. It's built upon the premises, what you believe about existence, what you believe about life, what you believe about your life specifically, and what you believe about other people's. Every decision that you've ever made in your relationships, your finances, your career, your health and fitness have come downstream from the premise upon which it is built. And for most people, they didn't choose that particular premise. They didn't actively choose it, right? It was inherited. Most money beliefs people carry from before the age of 10, maybe. The relationship beliefs they have are created or inherited before they've even dated anybody. Your career beliefs probably came before you even had your first job. You can have the best strategy in the world, and if you have faulty beliefs, it will fail almost every time. Again, we can go back to the example of money is the root of all evil, but I want to make $1 million this year. But we can also say, well, if we use a health and fitness example, well, everybody in my family is unhealthy, therefore I will be unhealthy. Because they are, I will be. If you have a goal to get six-pack abs or even lose a few lbs, it's probably going to be very difficult. As opposed to a belief that says, I don't know, my body is a temple, or I don't know, my health and fitness is solely my responsibility and I have the most control over it. Or something like this. Choosing an empowering belief as opposed to a inherited disempowering belief. And by the way, you do have the authority, you do have the ability to actively go into what you believe about a certain category of life, or maybe all of the categories of life, take out the disempowering beliefs, and replace them with empowering ones. You can definitely do that. You have the power to do that. And it's a sometimes spooky endeavor, but it is almost always worth it. It's incredibly difficult to build a genuinely fulfilling life based off of premises that do not serve you, based off of foundational beliefs that are disempowering. I think that that's, pretty observable. Self-sovereignty or agency or whatever you would like to call it, we talk a lot about that on this show, necessitates the ability to examine one's own beliefs and decide which ones actually belong to you, which ones are empowering and which ones are not. It necessitates that. Because if you are truly self-sovereign, if you are truly agentic, I guess you could say, everything that you believe on purpose. There's nothing unconscious or subconscious about it. You've chosen all of your beliefs because they serve you. Because who else would your beliefs serve, right? In conclusion, I shouldn't say almost nobody. Many people have not been taught how to think. Many people have not been taught how to reason. That's just the reality of the world. It just is, right? And when you're going about your day, you can spot people like this pretty easily. Once you have figured out that defining your terms is important, you've defined your premises, you reason from first principles, you actively look for why you are or could be wrong, and you know the difference between what you know and what you would believe. You can spot these people, right? And if you do these 5 things that I've just outlined, I believe that it will make you smarter, more intellectually capable than 99% of people roaming the earth right now. Because most people don't do one of these things, and you'll be doing all 5. And I'm not saying this from some place of, authority or whatever, because I struggle with these things. And it's difficult to fully dial in your intellectual process. It's pretty difficult to dial in your decision-making framework. But if you do, and this isn't a binary thing, I am or I am not, this is more of a spectrum. How dialed in are you, right? At some points, in some circumstances, I do 0 of these things. In some circumstances, I do all of them. More often than not, at least I try to more often than not, employ at least some of these, if not all of them. And if you try, more often than not, to employ these 5 things, or at least some of them, I believe, that you will intellectually surpass almost everybody that you know. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Justin Butcher. This has been the Lifebook Podcast. We changed the name. Thank you so much for watching or listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and we will see you next week.